Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody, and happy new year. This year I want to start off with a bit of a surprise. The surprise is how your lead wrist is actually working through impact. This is something that I've been analysing for the last few months with the help of a device called HackMotion, which is actually measuring how your lead wrist is working, how much flexion or extension it has during the golf swing. Why is this important? Because I think the majority of us are trying to get into a position at impact where we have flexion in the lead wrist and we have the hands ahead of the ball and of the club head at impact. This is a classic position that you'll see with all of the top golf professionals, and HackMotion is not telling you that this doesn't happen. That is not the surprise. However, it does show us how this is happening. And this surprised me. It surprised me because the majority of, say, traditional swingers of a golf club seem to be going into flexion in the downswing, holding this flexion through impact, and then releasing this flexion after impact. And looking at some of the graphs that HackMotion is showing us, that might not be the case. It's probably easier to understand if you think about the Dustin Johnson, Jon Rahm kind of swing. In these swings, what the guys are doing is kind of flexing their wrist back quite early in the backswing, so that at the top of the backswing, you can actually see this bowed wrist. And then as they come down, they release that angle. Now, obviously, if you've got an angle of anything up to kind of 40 degrees of flexion in your wrist, you don't want 40 degrees of flexion at impact. The average flexion at impact is somewhere between kind of 5 and 10 degrees, which means quite simply that these guys are flipping it. Not flipping it in the way that maybe a lot of amateur golfers are doing before they hit the golf ball. They go into extension. But they are certainly releasing this angle through impact, and that is something that a lot of amateur golfers are trying not to do. It seems in these graphs you have to do it. Now, what I'm going to do is throw a couple of graphs up on screen now and talk you through them so you get a kind of an idea of what we're looking at here. So this is basically the graph of a Dustin Johnson, Jon Rahm type of a golf swing. You can actually see this green line on the left-hand side shows you from the starting position of the wrist, or the lead wrist, and then as he takes the lead wrist back, you can actually see this going into flexion. Going into this negative number basically means it's flexing the wrist. And at the top of the swing, you can see that there's a lot of flexion in the wrist. And this flexion then releases into impact and continues to go into extension quite abruptly through impact. Now, if we come back to me, you can actually understand that the reason that they're doing this is to accelerate the golf club. Really, next to the idea of getting the club face back square on the ball and at right angles to the target so that you find the ball, the main job is to accelerate the golf club. Now, if you're holding this angle in order to get a bowed wrist and flexion at impact, then you are reducing the speed that you're creating in your golf swing, and that doesn't make any sense. So maybe the most practical and the most sensible way of doing this as far as the lead wrist is concerned is to do what Jon Rahm and Dustin Johnson are doing, bow your wrist back and then release it through impact. That would actually generate more speed than somebody blocking it. Blocking it is probably not a fair analogy. What we actually thought, or I thought, that Rorys and Tigers and the more traditional swingers of the golf club were doing was basically taking the club away from the ball with the lead wrist in extension and then slowly allowing it to go into flexion in the downswing and holding this flexion through impact before releasing it through after impact towards the target. We are talking about milliseconds, but if I throw this second graph up onto the screen, you'll see that maybe that's not quite true, because here at the bottom, at the impact position, you can actually see that the line is going up again, just the same way as it was doing with the Dustin Johnson, John Rahm example. They are also extending or starting to extend. Obviously, all good players have a bowing in the wrist at impact. However, they are releasing that bowing and going into extension, and that makes sense because they are all going to be trying to accelerate the golf club. Some just are doing it later than others. So strangely enough, the guys who are actually loading the club more in the downswing, getting this extension in the downswing, the flexion in the downswing, are not holding it through impact. They are releasing it through impact, even if it means they're releasing it in really just before the moment of impact. They are going into extension. There is no tension in the wrist. And this is the main kind of message that I want to pass on to you in this video. Don't hold it off through impact. Don't try and create this bowing position at impact. You have to create this bowing of the wrist either in the backswing or in the first half of the downswing. So between the top of the swing and around about hip height. This is what we call the transition phase of the swing, where you're basically changing direction. That's when you've got to be creating the bowing in the lead wrist, and then you have to release it. So you're trying to get more flexion in the start of your downswing or in your backswing than you actually require at impact in order to get to your impact position. And then you've got to be releasing it through impact, because otherwise you're going to be costing yourself club head speed. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So when you're out there hitting golf balls, make sure you are releasing the golf club through the golf ball if you want to hit the golf ball further in 2023. Next time I'm going to come back with a drill that helps you to do this. Until then, enjoy the week. See you next Sunday. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like the video. And a big, big thank you to all of the patrons to the channel. If you would like to become a patron, I shall leave a link below, together with a link to the Hack Motion. If you're interested in getting one for yourself, this little device will actually show you if you are actually doing what you should be doing in the golf swing.